This is Sarah Everard's last confirmed sighting on CCTV.
It was an extremely tense and traumatic number of days.
Her family, her friends, her boyfriend, they're all really, really worried. Can we find her? Is she safe?
It is worrying.
I walk here in Clapham every day. I will not forget you.
We needed to do more, we are doing more, and we will continue to do more to earn that trust.
We have a long way to go.
In March 2021, the UK remained under COVID-19 restrictions. Limits on movement and social contact were still in place, and large gatherings were prohibited. Daily routines had adjusted to those conditions, with fewer people travelling and quieter public spaces across much of the country. Despite this, people continued to go about their day-to-day lives, following familiar routes and routines. Amid this was Sarah Everard, moving through her usual routine under the conditions of lockdown.
My name is Claire Cohen. I'm an author and journalist who covered the disappearance of Sarah Everard in March 2021. Sarah was a 33-year-old marketing executive. Obviously none of us can know what she was like, but her loved ones have painted quite a vivid picture of her personality as somebody who was vibrant and radiant and enthusiastic about life, who was very active. She had a great job. She'd just been promoted, in fact, and was looking forward to starting a new role. She had a long-term boyfriend. Her family have said that she was on the brink of her adult life, really. She was looking forward to starting a family. You know someone like Sarah. You know a young woman who perhaps is your sister, your niece, your girlfriend, your friend, your daughter, who is on the brink of adulthood and who is looking forward to all the years ahead and what might come next.
Her story begins here, in the ordinary, everyday moments that formed part of daily life at the time.
So that evening we know that Sarah had been to visit a friend in Clapham, and she lived nearby in Brixton Hill, so not a great distance away at all. And she and her friend had had dinner together. They'd shared a bottle of wine. And then Sarah left her friend's house at around 9 p.m. for the walk home. And that walk was about 45 to 50 minutes long, which I think to some people probably sounds quite a lot. But as somebody who lives in that area and knows that route very well, it's really not that far. It's a route that takes you down several really long, brightly lit main roads, which even during that time, during the COVID lockdowns, were pretty busy. I was walking those streets myself when we were allowed to go outside and do outside activity. And they're very busy main streets. She wouldn't have felt conscious that that was a particularly long walk or a particularly strange or backstreet route. On her way home from visiting her friend in Clapham, Sarah phoned her boyfriend, and we know that she left her friends at around 9 p.m. and she called him and they spoke for around 15 minutes and they were chatting about making plans the next day. That phone call is quite indicative of, I think, something that really resonated with women, because we all do these things to kind of keep ourselves safe when we walk home or when we're walking around the streets of London or wherever we might live at night. You know, we phone somebody, don't we, as a sort of security thing, or we carry our keys in the palm of our hand, we wear flat shoes, we wear trainers, as Sarah was that night. So I think that phone call sort of was quite resonant with a lot of young women. It's the sort of thing any of us might do: call our boyfriend, call our husband, call our mum, call our friend, text somebody to let them know we get home safe. And in fact, the phone call went dead, and we don't know whether her phone battery ran out or whether her phone was switched off. But that call was ended, and Josh was the last person to speak to her.
Sarah was reported missing the following day after her boyfriend was unable to reach her. When her workplace confirmed she had not arrived, police launched an immediate investigation. She had last been seen in good spirits, talking on the phone shortly before she disappeared.
As well as CCTV footage, there was some phone site cell analysis that pinpointed Sarah's mobile phone as being on Poinders Road on the South Circular at just before 9:30 p.m, when of course no camera footage exists of her after that time. So that enabled the police to really focus in on that area as the place where she was last seen.
Poinders Road is part of the South Circular. Even in lockdown, it's busy with traffic. What happened to Sarah after she walked down here is a complete mystery.
Police appealed for information from the public, urging anyone who may have seen anything to come forward.
Living around here, I know that if you want to get from where she was, it's quite complicated to take a bus, so the easiest way is actually to walk it.
I think it's tougher for women anyway. I hate to stereotype, but definitely as a female, a pregnant one, I've definitely felt nervous in some situations when walking home alone at night. And I think that, it is genuinely just a bit tougher for us sometimes.
To be honest, it really heightened my feeling of not feeling safe. For me, that was such a big catalyst for changing my behaviour. I was running then anyway, but I'd run around Clapham Common and not feel safe because it was dark.
A young girl on her own, walking down a normal street, it is worrying.
If you can't be safe going home, then where can you be safe? It's a bit scary when you think that, it could be any one of us.
It was absolutely impossible at that time to walk around, to go to the local park without seeing the flyers with Sarah's radiant, sunny face staring back at you from them. And it immediately gave you that sense that she could be your friend, she could be your colleague, she could be your sister. It was incredibly difficult to walk around and see that and to worry about her and to worry for yourself and to worry for your loved ones.
The search for Sarah initially began in the places in which she was last seen. Clapham Common was searched by the police extensively. Ponds and lakes were searched. The streets were crawling with the police in hopes of finding her. Hundreds of members of the public were questioned, and the search only continued to expand and intensify.
Good afternoon, my name's Detective Chief Inspector Catherine Goodwin, leading the investigation into the disappearance of Sarah Everard. I just wanted to provide you with an update into the investigation. It continues at pace. We are currently knocking on doors. We've spoken to over 750 different people and addresses have been visited. We continue to receive hundreds of calls from the public, received over 100 calls so far, and follow up the information and pursue every line of inquiry that comes out of that. We've reviewed hours of CCTV around her movements on the night, but I appeal for people to come forward with more CCTV, particularly anyone with a dash cam, for example delivery drivers who may have been driving along Poinders Road on the Wednesday at around last Wednesday at around 9:30 at night. The evidence that you have on your dash cam could be absolutely vital to finding Sarah.
While the police had hundreds of hours of footage to work through of Sarah's last movements and her journey home, it took a few days for the footage from the dash camera of a London bus to come in.
CCTV from a passing bus showed a car pulled up on the pavement, hazard lights blinking. Next to it, Sarah was seen speaking with a man. Using CCTV and automatic number plate recognition, investigators began tracking the vehicle's movements, following its route out of London and into Kent. Although the number plate was not clearly visible in the footage, officers cross-referenced available data to identify vehicles passing through the area at that time. From this, they were able to narrow it down to a specific car, which was later confirmed to be a hire vehicle. A car hired by the name of Wayne Cousins, a man later identified as a serving Metropolitan Police officer. This revelation quickly shifted the focus of the case. The involvement of a police officer, someone entrusted with enforcing the law, introduced a new and deeply concerning dimension to the investigation into Sarah Everard's disappearance. As these developments emerged, public attention sharpened. What had begun as a missing person investigation was now evolving into a far more complex and high-case profile, with growing scrutiny on both the individual involved and the wider circumstances surrounding the incident. This became a crucial lead for investigators, who went to his address to question him.
The other strand to this, of course, is that it was during the COVID-19 lockdown, and by visiting her friend, Sarah had bent the lockdown rules, and it's really important to remember the atmosphere at that time. We were living in a world where people were being fined for sitting on park benches. There was a lot of tension going on between the police, between the public, between the government. We were all very paranoid and very tense. And when she thought she had bent the rules and she'd been stopped by a police officer, of course, her first thought, probably, as it would be for any of us, would have been, ooh, I've done something wrong, I've potentially broken the law, and I've been caught out for that, and I now have to face the consequences.
I am Dr. Jane McCartney. I'm a chartered psychologist, which means that I study human behaviour in various forms.
When officers attended to question Wayne Cousins, the interview formed a critical early stage of the investigation. Detectives outlined the seriousness of the situation, making clear that Sarah was still missing and that her family were increasingly concerned for her safety.
The inquiry that's been conducted so far has led us to come and speak to you about it and to see what you know about Sarah, okay? So, would you like to, do you know where Sarah is?
No.
Right, okay.
I think the reason why he quickly said no in the interview to one of the accusations, do you know where Sarah is, was because that was an instant defence. And in that defence, I think he thinks he's buying time.
Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, man.
Have you had any interactions with her at all?
No, why would I have personal interactions with her?
Well, it's very difficult because I can't go into a lot of the evidence because obviously that would require, that's not part of what an urgent interview is, okay? This interview is just about trying to find her. Because she's been missing for a while now.
I'm sat in handcuffs and I know her, so you must have something to say that I know her.
To begin with, he's obviously processing what's going on, and then he starts fishing for information. What do you know that then I can then defend, or how much do you know? And I thought the police officers that were interviewing were very good. They kept to the point, they kept coming back to the point that they wanted to know. They kept obviously trying to appeal to him to say, her family, her friends, her boyfriend, they're all really, really worried. That's all we want to know is where she is. Can we find her? Is she safe?
The priority at that stage is simple: to establish what happened as quickly and as accurately as possible.
His brain would have been whirring away at that moment. What do they know? How can I get out of this? So his body language is, it's interesting because he's kind of sitting back on his couch and he's got his handcuffs on and he mentions the fact, I'm handcuffed, and there's this indignation to it.
In his initial police interview, Wayne Cousins told the police a story that truly beggars belief. He told them that he was under pressure by an Eastern European gang to drive around South London and find women for them. He said that he had been ripped off by a call girl and was under pressure to do this, otherwise his family would be under threat from this gang.
There was a white Sprinter van. It was between sort of Lemon, Maidstone area that I dropped her off. I still don't know. I don't know. I just parked my car up, and then the van come up behind me, flashed me. They all jumped out, and then they took this girl. They said, "You've done good," and I don't know whether my family's going to be alright still. But they threatened to take my family away from me. So at that point, I'm doing what I can to protect my family. That's it.
After the interview, Wayne Couzens was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping, raising a pressing and urgent question. Could Sarah still be alive?
We know very clearly that he wanted to find a woman on her own that night. He hired a car expressly for that purpose. And the details about that car tell us a story in themselves, because he went to Enterprise in Dover and he chose a white Vauxhall. And that is a model and a colour of that car that's frequently used by undercover police officers. So he knew he'd be able to pass it off potentially if he needed to. In fact, he told colleagues that he'd done this because his own car wasn't working properly, something that was later proven to be false. So he was thinking about what he would do, how he would defend himself, perhaps the excuses he would make.
Following the interview with Wayne Couzens, the focus of the investigation shifted to Kent. Police activity intensified across multiple locations as officers began a series of targeted searches. Areas of interest were identified through a combination of CCTV analysis, vehicle tracking, and information gathered during the investigation. Search teams were deployed to rural sites, with specialist units brought in to examine the terrain in detail. Officers worked to preserve potential evidence, carefully searching open land, woodland, and surrounding areas. As the scale of the search became clear, it marked a significant development in the case of Sarah Everard. As the investigation deepened, further details began to emerge, including that he had called in sick to work in the days following Sarah's kidnapping. He had told his family he was working a night shift, but in reality, he travelled to Clapham and he found Sarah. Police then tracked his phone movements from Clapham, which led them to Hodes Wood, a plot of land belonging to Wayne Couzens. There, in the water, they made a grim discovery: human remains. The news was delivered to her family soon after, and he was arrested on suspicion of murder.
The news today that it was a Metropolitan Police officer who was arrested on suspicion of Sarah's murder has sent shockwaves and anger through the public and through the Met. I speak on behalf of all my colleagues when I say that we are utterly appalled at this dreadful, dreadful news.
But that was not the only revelation to emerge from the investigation. As detectives continued their inquiries, a broader picture of Wayne Couzens began to take shape, one that extended beyond the events of March 2021. Attention turned to a series of prior allegations of indecent exposure. Through verified reports and official records, it became clear these incidents were not isolated. In the years leading up to the murder of Sarah Everard, multiple complaints had been made, all while serving as an officer with the Metropolitan Police Service.
There was an incident at a McDonald's drive-through, and there was a really horrific incident involving a woman who was cycling and saw Couzens standing naked on a country lane on a grassy embankment, masturbating, and she was forced to cycle past him and then recognised his face on the news when he was arrested for Sarah's murder. These women have expressed how absolutely desolate they feel that they reported these incidents at the time, and yet nothing was ever done. The dots weren't joined. Even when Couzens' number plate was given to the police, nothing was done. He wasn't identified, he wasn't interviewed, he wasn't charged, he wasn't arrested.
Further details only continued to emerge about Wayne Couzens' past. During his time with Kent Police, it was reported that colleagues had given him a deeply concerning nickname.
His nickname when he had volunteered with Kent Police had been the Rapist. And this is just unbelievable to me, that a nickname like that wouldn't have been interrogated by senior officers, wouldn't have been picked up by the Met when he went on to join them. He was given that nickname because he was known to harass women, because his female colleagues were uncomfortable with his behaviour, and because he had an extreme pornography habit. These are not the sort of people we want in our police forces.
There were also accounts of a WhatsApp group involving officers in which inappropriate and offensive messages were shared. While the full context of these exchanges was subject to investigation, their existence added to growing concerns about culture and conduct. Taken together, these revelations contributed to a wider examination of both individual behaviour and the environments in which it was allowed to persist, prompting further scrutiny of standards, oversight and accountability.
I think Wayne Couzens would have been doing this for absolutely years beforehand. And I think the company that he was keeping within the Met as well, that bravado, that one-upmanship that was going on as well. Now, you're not going to say, oh, this is what I've been doing, but there's little kind of indications and hints that people are behaving in a way that's illegal or immoral, and they're listening to that.
Like many, I wish that Wayne Couzens had been arrested for these offences, and for that I'm sorry. I do accept there are missed opportunities, and I am sorry for the Sarah Everard family. I can't pretend to put myself in their shoes. I can't imagine what must be going through their minds today.
There are no words that I can use that can adequately express to the Everard family just how sorry we are across the whole of policing. I was left aghast at the catalogue of missed opportunities, errors, red flags to stop Wayne Couzens.
People began to question something that had once felt certain. Who could they trust?
The fact he did all of this while serving as a police officer is something that brings shame on myself and all of us who swore an oath to protect those communities that we serve.
Wayne Couzens was never fit to be a police officer. Police leaders need to be sure there isn't another Couzens operating in plain sight.
My thoughts in particular are with all those that Wayne Couzens had targeted, and of course Sarah Everard's family. I absolutely recognise that we have a huge amount to do to earn trust, to rebuild it back.
Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer.
Wayne Couzens should not have been in the police service.
Wayne Couzens' crimes were horrific, and he should not have been a police officer in a position to abuse that. We have a long way to go.
Her body had been burnt beyond recognition, and she had been stuffed in a bag, and she had to be identified by her dental records. An autopsy following the discovery of her remains determined that she had died due to compression of the neck, which we now believe was Wayne Couzens' police belt. On that night, Wayne Couzens abused his power as a police officer in the most horrific way imaginable. He used his police ID and his handcuffs to stage the false arrest of a young woman, to lure her into the back of a car that he had hired expressly for that purpose, to drive her to Dover, where his own car was parked up, to sexually assault her. He used his police belt to strangle her, which is just a horrific detail amongst many horrific details. And then he drove to the Woodlands in Kent, nearby where he lived, and he disposed of her body there. He burnt her. Sarah's body had to be identified by her dental records.
What became alarming was the revelation in which Couzens had been planning this act for a while, in the days leading up to Sarah's murder. He was caught on camera multiple times in local stores purchasing all the items needed.
And then, of course, there's the CCTV footage that shows us very clearly that Couzens was premeditating this. And he is captured before Sarah's kidnap and murder and afterwards, visiting DIY shops, buying robble sacks, buying petrol, buying adhesive, hair bands. The list goes on, the horrific list goes on.
In the days after the murder, Couzens told senior officers that he was suffering from stress and no longer wanted to carry a gun. He bought and filled a petrol container at a service station in Whitfield on the 5th of March. His car was then captured on CCTV at 12:37, heading to Hodes Wood, where he burned Sarah's body inside a refrigerator. At 13:47, he bought 2 large builder's bags from B&Q, where he used one of the bags to dispose of Sarah's remains. On the 8th of March, he reported himself ill from work, handing in his equipment, including his police belt and handcuffs.
Wayne Couzens would have compartmentalised his life. So down in Deal, where his home life was, his wife, his children, his pets, that would have been one section of his life. He kind of, came home and became that dad, that husband, that good man, the person that was even booking vet's appointments after he'd killed Sarah, I seem to remember. And it's interesting that geographically, from where he worked to where he lived, is a good, dozens and dozens of miles away. So as he's driving home from work, that's almost like his change of character, his change of personality. I'm now back to being Mr. Couzens, husband and good dad. And when he drives to work, he's then changing into the character of, right, I'm now being this police officer. And what came with that, the advantages that came with that.
I think one of the things that a lot of people really struggled with was how seemingly easy it was for Wayne Couzens to return to his so-called normal life in the wake of kidnapping, raping and murdering Sarah. He took his kids out to play. He phoned the vet to talk about the family dog and to seek advice on it having separation anxiety, something any of us might do. He was caught on CCTV going to a petrol station, buying a coffee, buying a Bakewell tart, everyday activities. And of course those everyday activities take on a really sinister undertone when you know the horrific crime he's just committed.
Sarah's phone ceased activity shortly after her abduction and was later recovered having been discarded, forming part of the timeline investigators reconstructed. During searches, including of his personal vehicle, officers removed items believed to have been used as restraints, including Velcro straps, which prosecutors suggested may have been used during the abduction. Had the previous cases of misconduct been investigated, Cousins would have lost his job, lost his warrant card, and wouldn't have been able to trick Sarah into that car.
We live in a world where still too often women aren't believed. That's the hard fact. We aren't always believed by the police officers we report crimes to. And sadly, I think we too often just don't believe in ourselves. We don't have the confidence that an incident of harassment or stalking or sexual assault has happened to us. And that is indicative of a wider culture in society, in policing, in politics, that tells us that our safety isn't serious, that it doesn't deserve to be treated with seriousness. And that is the deep root of this problem that really will take years, I think, to unpick.
Sarah Everard, Sabina Nessa, Wenjing Lin, Jatika Goyle and Benelin Burke are names which, with all the others, must never be forgotten.
Sarah's murder started a nationwide conversation around women's safety, and women started talking about the things we do to keep ourselves safe in a way that we never had before. All those small actions that you take and almost have become part of everyday life so that we don't even think about them. Things like walking home with your keys in your hand so that presumably if you're attacked you have a ready weapon, wearing trainers, wearing bright colours, messaging your friends when you get home to let them know you're back safe, walking in well-lit streets, all the things that Sarah actually did right herself and yet did nothing to keep her safe. Because guess what? We're not tackling the causes of these crimes and we're not making enough effort to root out the perpetrators. And it was really interesting. In fact, it was revolutionary that women were having these conversations, I think, for the first time and recognising, well, hang on, why is the burden on us to keep ourselves safe? Why is the onus on us? It absolutely shouldn't be, and enough is enough. And that was really compounded by some of the helpful suggestions that the police made in the days and weeks after Sarah's murder, such as, well, if you're worried about your safety or if a police officer stops you and you're not sure of his credentials, don't worry, you can just wave down a bus and the driver will stop and help you, which is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard in terms of keeping women safe, not least because in London, if you try and wave down a bus at a bus stop, it often doesn't stop.
This would become a widely discussed public issue. Across the United Kingdom, posts appeared in rapid succession. Women sharing their experiences, expressing fear, anger, and a need to be heard. What began as individual voices quickly grew into something collective, as calls to gather and stand together gained momentum. Out of this, a vigil was planned in memory of Sarah Everard. A moment intended for reflection, solidarity, and remembrance. But as those plans took shape, the response from the Metropolitan Police Service introduced a new tension. Due to COVID-19 restrictions in place at the time, the vigil could not go ahead as intended.
We wanted to do something locally so that we were able to remember that, show solidarity to each other, feel some safety in numbers, and to say that actually this isn't a problem with women.
The tributes that have been left for her, that was a small pile at the start of the day. People have been gathering around me now to leave messages of support for her. And I just want to read a couple of those to you. Some of them saying, for Sarah and for all those threatened by violence in our streets. Others saying, I walk here in Clapham every day. I will not forget you.
I think it's really important that we have a space to come together to grieve and also to channel our emotions and our anger about the violence that we see against women every single day in our society.
And these are conversations that you want to be spread wider, not just with women, but with men as well, is that right?
Yes, I mean, we can't just continuously only have this conversation every few years. We need actual real societal change to happen. We need to eliminate violence against women. We deserve to make it home safely. We have to stop saying that women need to be more vigilant. We're already hyper-vigilant. We need to focus on how we prevent, or instead of preventing attacks against women, how to completely eliminate it and to stop shouldering all the blame and responsibility on women for this violence.
Although the planned vigil was officially cancelled after discussions with the Metropolitan Police Service, people still turned up. Throughout the evening, the crowd grew as more arrived at Clapham Common, choosing to gather despite the lockdown restrictions at that time. This was known as the unofficial vigil. As the sun began to set, candles were lit and placed along the ground, marking the route Sarah would have taken on her walk home. Among them were candles for other women who had lost their lives to male violence in the UK that year. As the numbers grew and the crowd settled, it became clear that people were not going to leave, and the night would take a turn for the worst.
Some of the most stark and shocking images to come out of the vigil were those of women being handcuffed on that bandstand on Clapham Common. Handcuffed, just a few days after it had emerged that Sarah had been falsely handcuffed by a police officer staging a fake arrest. I cannot imagine in whose world that was deemed to be appropriate.
Several women were handcuffed by police at the vigil, as officers enforced COVID-19 restrictions on gatherings.
That imagery went around the world, and I'm not surprised. It was shocking. A particular image of a young red-headed woman named Patsy Stevenson, who has since become quite a vocal advocate for the ending of violence against women, was on the front page of every newspaper, as well it should have been. It was utterly appalling. And of course, A lot of those officers who were doing that handcuffing were male officers. There were certainly questions asked at the time, and there have been questions asked by police officers that I've spoken to in the months and years since about why the force at that vigil wasn't entirely female. Even at your most cynical, just purely for the optics of it, before anything had truly been able to be sorted out within the police, surely having only female officers at a vigil like that would have been the bare minimum you could do. And yet instead, you had a police force and arguably a police commissioner who completely failed to understand the mood at the time and sent male officers to that vigil and then allowed them to handcuff young women. Truly appalling and shocking. I still find it shocking to this day.
We're talking about just physically much smaller women to bigger men as well. It must have been absolutely terrifying for them as well. They're there to mark, you know, something awful that had happened to another woman, and yet they're being kind of harassed and, I don't know, you could almost say victimised by the police themselves.
Commissioner Cressida Dick faced criticism over comments suggesting the case should be seen as the actions of one bad apple in the police force. For some, that framing did not reflect the wider concerns being raised, particularly as more details about Wayne Couzens' background began to emerge. These moments added a growing sense of disconnect between police leadership and the concerns being expressed by the public. She defended the Met, noting that officers had faced a difficult situation trying to manage an unlawful gathering during the pandemic, and emphasised that she believed the police had acted appropriately under the circumstances. In response, the public criticism and intensity of the backlash forced Dick to consider her position and whether she should resign.
Having a blanket, it was policed properly, from Cressida Dick, the then Commissioner of the Police, was really shocking. Shocking because she was the highest police officer in the land, and also because she was female as well. I think this is why so many women found her response. Now, she would say that she was kind of protecting her rank and file, but read the room, Cressida, really. It was really, really shocking that she came out with that statement.
I remember saying to the person next to me, the woman next to me, are you here until the end? And she said, yeah. Are you? And I said, yeah. And it felt like that moment of like, something's going to happen.
They were merely acting on COVID regulations. They were just trying to enforce what was important at the time. What's your take on that?
Well, I'd stress that the transcript says otherwise. I've seen a lot of evidence. I've seen the transcript of what was said between officers, and I know what was said. They know what was said.
What did they say?
From what I recall, something about let's nick them.
In July 2021, Wayne Couzens pleaded guilty to the kidnap, rape, and murder of Sarah Everard. He was later given a whole life order, meaning he will spend the rest of his life in prison. He was also sentenced to an additional 19 months for 3 separate offences of indecent exposure.
A damning indictment indeed to policing for failing that. And my thoughts go out to Sarah Everard and her family, because yet again they're going to be reminded of the failings of police to identify a sexual predator within their rank that actually led to the death of Sarah.
In court, Sarah Everard's father asked Wayne Couzens to turn and face him, as he said, "No punishment you receive will ever compare to the pain and torture you've inflicted on us," while Sarah's sister, overwhelmed by rage and grief, spoke of her disgust as Wayne Couzens appeared to cry in the dock.
Sarah Everard was put in the back of his hire car with her hands cuffed behind her back, an act which would have meant she wouldn't have even been able to undo her seatbelt. The prosecutor then surmised that at some point in her 80-mile journey which led to her rape and murder, she would have realised her fate.
With his head bowed, his eyes closed, shaking slightly as he was sentenced, Sarah Everard's family looked at him, then looked at each other with clear relief. But as the judge said, their lives are left irretrievably damaged.
A really haunting detail from the night that Couzens kidnapped and raped and murdered Sarah is that there was actually an eyewitness to that false arrest. A couple who drove past in their car have spoken about how they saw him staging the false arrest of a young woman and handcuffing her against the car. And of course, in the moment, they, like Sarah, thought it was a legitimate arrest, although they noticed it because a young woman being arrested is not the sort of thing you see every day. They thought it was entirely normal in that she must have done something wrong. And they've expressed in the wake of that how disturbed they are, that they perhaps had an opportunity to stop it. Of course they didn't in reality, and none of us perhaps would have intervened and would have done anything in the moment. But with the benefit of hindsight, it's a really chilling detail.
She described seeing Sarah, who already had her left arm behind her back, was in the process of holding out her other arm to be handcuffed. She said Sarah was compliant, her head was bowed, and she didn't seem to be arguing.
She was handcuffed. She was with a stranger. She must have felt absolutely terrified. There must have been this dawning horror that Couzens was either not who he'd said he was or had staged a false arrest. I mean, goodness knows what was going through her mind. And actually, some of the words spoken by her mother in her victim impact statement in court, her mother said that every night at that time, she thinks of her daughter and just thinks, Sarah, run, get away from him, get away from that car. She has that conversation with her daughter every single night. It's just agonising. And to imagine that your loved one, your friend, even for women who felt empathy with Sarah and who think of her regularly still, to imagine her going through that process and the fear she must have felt is just absolutely heartbreaking.
This man has brought shame on the Met. Speaking frankly, as an organisation, we have been rocked. I commit to keep working with others to improve women's safety and reduce the fear of violence. I am so sorry.
I just wish a movement like this happened before.